Hello, hello. Happy Wednesday. Oh, it's almost the end of the month. March 29th. 2 more days to go. Which means get ready to be on your guard for everybody on the internet pulling April Fool's pranks. It's about that time. I'm pretty sure I've actually seen one already. I got like an advertisement for some pizza place. It was like a tiny little paint roller that they said was for rolling dip onto your pizza. So I was like, oh, that's a prank. Not a great one either. I was like, oh, okay. Puppy. I see BBAB in the chat. How are ya? You know, assume you're probably a little lurkish right now. Lurkerly. A few other names in there that I recognize that I've seen before but haven't spoken to. So hello to any of you that might actually be people. How's it going? How's your week been? Are you having a good Wednesday? Wednesday, March 29th, 2023? 7:02 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Farmos is a people. That's good, because I've got you set as a moderator, and that'd be embarrassing if it turned out you weren't. I mean, you know, among other reasons. But that's the most important one. Ben's giving me a look down there. Look at that guy. Look at him giving me a look. He's a good puppy. That's true. He is a good puppy. He is 95% good puppy. Kind of tired today. What else is new, am I right? No, but for real though. 5% cranky old man. Yeah. And then somehow an extra like 5% of looking for snacks out in the wild when he should not be looking for snacks, and crunching something and me going, no, hey, what are you eating? But it's too late and I'll never find out. And I only have to hope and pray that it's not poison. Cranky old man who really likes snacks. Yeah. Somehow simultaneously cranky old man and young scamp. Yeah. We could never have him just have like a window out to the front yard. He would spend all day barking out there. Wouldn't you? Wouldn't you just be barking all day long? And most of the night? Or maybe he'd get used to it and then he wouldn't bark anymore. Maybe that would be it. little warm. There's no B on warm. It's not warm, it's just warm. Warm and sleepy and complainy. I'm a cranky old man. That pizza sucked. Such a disappointment getting bad food. Hello, Sharkies! I guess probably just Mrs. Sharky, am I right? Because Mr. Sharky is maybe otherwise occupied? And because you said I am here and not we are here? So I'm assuming just Mrs. He's off to rehearsal. Oh, good. Good for him. That's exciting. How's your week been? So I was thinking, I always just kind of on here, just call you Mrs. Sharky, but that's, I don't know, is that nice weather? Yeah. I know you have a different account that you log into sometimes that has a different name, and then I get confused because I'm not expecting it. But should I call you something else? Something more you specific, or are you good with Mrs. Sharky? Whatever you prefer. Yeah. Okay. Just wanted to make sure. I think I've probably actually asked that before. Why am I warm? Probably because of the nice weather. Hey Google, what's the temperature in the family room?
Heating is set to 21 degrees with a current temperature of 21.5 degrees.
21.5? That's why. Farmos, would you mind turning on the, dare I say it, air conditioning? More with Mrs. Sharky. I feel like Farmouse's sister, I think, was asking if Sharky was in reference to the end of Lord of the Rings. To Sharky's End or whatever it is. To that it's such an odd bit. It is not, though it is a delightful coincidence. Oh, okay. That's one of those bits where I understand why they left it out of the films. I mean, the films have enough endings as it is already, that old joke. But just, it's such a, I get like it brings some closure to certain things and it shows the strength of some, shows like the strength of some characters or something like that, right? Like it shows how some growth from, and it kind of brings things a little bit sort of full circle. But it's still odd, isn't it? The end of Lord of the Rings in the books. I need to reread those because I honestly don't remember all of the details. Among other reasons. Like I haven't actually fully read The Lord of the Rings since I was like a child. It's just such a daunting thing to begin. So a needle pulling thread. Ray, a drop of golden sun. That's not right, is it? La. It should be la. Hey, Jesse Kuma's back. Welcome back. How are you doing? He just read the part in Return of the King when the Witch King is killed. Mia was as stunned and thrilled to find out who did it as we hoped she would be. I suppose they have not, is this their first, like, full exposure to Lord of the Rings? I guess they're both a little young for the movies. Kinda. I'm doing pretty well. Despite my complaining, I'm doing pretty well. Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking. Winnipeg's doing pretty well. Right? If you say yes, I'll give you more snack. His tail's wagging. Which is totally because he's doing well and not because he's being offered more snack. Yeah, I guess there's a fair amount of stabbing and beheading and shooting and... Yeah. It's also... It's pretty rare in Star Wars for someone to fully be, like, confirmed as killed. It happens, obviously. And it happens on a much larger scale in some cases. Like, you know, planets getting blown up. Spoiler warning. Planets get blown up. But, you know, most of the time, like, you see, like, a stormtrooper or someone get shot, and, you know, they fall down, but they're wearing armor. Presumably it absorbs some of the impact. Maybe they survive. Maybe they're just stunned or injured. There is that, yeah. The younglings. Not to mention the, nothing on camera. And I mean, you know, occasionally someone gets chopped up into little pieces. Bits get lopped off and go flying, but, you know, with a lightsaber, so it's cauterized. Blasters are set to stun. What I have heard about the Stormtrooper armor is that it is supposed to be, like, it's effective against civilian weapons. But it's Star Wars, right? And so everybody's using souped up guns and military gear and stuff like that. And so the armor doesn't, you know, isn't fully effective in that regard because, well, it's not built to withstand military level blasters, I suppose. Ooh, Fallen Order. How was it? I own that. That's because there's Jedi Survivors coming out soon. I don't know if those two are linked, but I own Jedi Fallen Order, and I just have not gotten around to play it because it's just one of the list of games I've got queued up. I was just playing Yakuza Kiwami, which is the Yakuza games are they're weird. They're like they've got these really dark and melodramatic storylines that are just, I don't know, people are getting shot and killed and people are betraying one another and whatever. But then they've got these like side quests where you go and race slot cars or play games with children or go disco dancing or sing karaoke, like just this and like that's not touching on any of the weird stuff because there's a lot of really really weird side quests and things. In the first, the sort of prequel game, Yakuza 0, you make a music video with totally not Michael Jackson. Which involves you fighting a lot of extras that are pretending to be zombies because it's totally not Thriller as the music video that you're making. And I think it's being directed by totally not Steven Spielberg or something. I literally just finished playing it. It was a good game. That's a. I did hear that that one was a fairly um, linear game, as you say. I find that exploration in games is tricky for me. Like, like the more open world a game gets, the less likely I am to actually finish it. Um, is the way I find it. Like I enjoy them, I'll play them, but the problem is that I need to explore everything. I need to find everything, which means that I don't actually play through the actual story. Um, that's like the more recent Assassin's Creed games have gotten more and more like huge and open world, and so I'll dump hours and hours and hours into them, and I won't actually beat the game and finish the story. Um, and that's also tricky because it sounds like, hey, you're putting all these hours into the game. What does it matter if you don't finish it? But a lot of their big budget scenes and their big set pieces and things like that get put into the core story, right? They want those big dramatic moments and the really like exciting stuff to happen in the core story. So if you're just doing all the exploration and side quests, you get lots of little interesting things, usually some humor, whatever, but you don't see any of the really big fancy stuff in the game. Um, so I feel like I really need to, and I've told myself going into some of these games, not going into, usually partway through, I go, oh, okay, I need to buckle down and do the main story. Um, but I'm no good at it. It's something, I see something and I get distracted and I go off chasing some magical horse or something like that. I feel like he always hides, just like he knows where the camera is and he hides just out of sight. So, Jesse Kuma, who are you? Tell me about yourself. What brought you here? Should probably actually get to this at some point, huh? But yeah, I heard overall, like, I didn't hear any big spoilers or anything, but I heard just in general that Fallen Order was good. Unless it makes you uncomfortable. What, I'm not allowed to ask questions? I didn't say it had to be real answers. You can make stuff up if you want. I did play. I don't know if they're related at all, but I played the. What are they called? The Force Unleashed games, I think they were called, which were. At the time they came out, I think George Lucas or someone said that they were going to be canon, which I feel like is just something that gets said about games and things frequently in order to sell them, right? It's just an advertising thing. Got more into reading you from Indiana. Well, I'm from Vancouver, Canada, so pretty far away. Oh, so Survivor is a sequel. I wasn't certain. What did you play Force Unleashed on? Because I played it's weird. On the Wii. See, when Force Unleashed was coming out, it had these really intense graphical engine things for the time, right? Where your lightsaber would cut through things and, using the Force would, like, smash glass. And if you flung two stormtroopers with the Force, they'd, like, grab onto each other to try and, like, I don't know, save themselves or something. But a lot of that stuff got cut out from the Wii version of the game. The Wii version of the game was very trimmed down and different in some ways, because Nintendo systems since basically like, I don't know, it's weird. They used to be like on par graphically, and in some cases quite nice. Like the GameCube had some good looking games, but they haven't tried to keep up. I feel like lately that hasn't been their focus. Ah, I have read those books. I have not watched the show. I have not watched Game of Thrones, but I've read all the books. Um, but so, anyways, the Wii version of the game. But the thing was, I found it fun to play because you were using the Wiimotes, and I really enjoyed the controls, right? You know, winging your saber around and chucking it and stuff, right? Was more motion control like. And then I think I tried it on PlayStation or something later on, but it was very like button combo press heavy, and I just didn't really get into it. The story for Force Unleashed was, you know, Darth Vader's secret apprentice. What was his name? Starkiller or something? A terrible name. And I don't know if there was much of an explanation for why he was so powerful. Because doesn't he like, and maybe like Force Unleashed 2 or something, I'm pretty sure he uses the Force to like pull down a Star Destroyer, which is kind of overkill, I think. It had some neat like visual moments. There's a part where you're in like part of a space station that's plummeting to Earth or something like that, and or not Earth, obviously, and you're fighting a Jedi while that's happening. That was cool. So, how are you enjoying A Song of Ice and Fire? How far into it are you? I have. Plug the controller. Okay, okay. I'm not going to. I've got criticisms about the books, um, which I'm not going to get into, but I did think that Mr. Martin was very good at painting a picture. Um, I remember, I don't know, some of the scenes were very visually well described, I thought. You know, reading the words, I could really picture what was happening, or how it was supposed to look, or, you know, what that tree was like. Um, yeah. So that's what I something I really liked about it. About 50. Oh, okay. You've seen the show, so it's not going to be surprising. The story beats aren't going to catch you off guard. I wonder if having watched the show first will make it easier for you to keep track of the characters. There'll probably be more characters in the books than the show, I would imagine. I guess I don't know, not having watched the show, but because there's so many characters. I mean, yeah, that's everybody knows that, I suppose. Even if you haven't seen the show at all, I'm sure you've heard that. I wasn't here on Friday, so it's been a week. Um, Visual, yeah. Yeah, I guess that's something there'll be. There won't be, I think, any story beats to surprise you, but there will be lots of detail, which will be, I think, an interesting thing. Where did we? How much did we read last time? Where did we start last time? I think we had all the jokes about them doing a witchy airline. Ruh-roh. Mr. Sharkey. Hiding books. For shame. P.S. The privies here are disgusting. They have them indoors. So much for hygiene. They drank some absinthe and messed with some bulls. Crocheting. Crotcheting. Yeah, they talked about foreign food and how complicated it is. Amigurumi turnip. I'm intrigued. Granny got very upset about open-faced sandwiches. They complained about the names of foreign food, which don't tell you plain what it is, unlike Bubble and Squeak or Spotted Dick, which are decent, honest food. Boy. This is a picture of some famous bridge or other. Lots of love, Mum. So then they got drunk on absinthe and messed with some bulls. Messed with the thing with the bulls. Still trying to plan out how to make a hat with 18 pockets. Another thing with that, is you have to be careful that it is not symmetrical. If you're going to have a witchy hat with 18 pockets on it, the pockets have to be various sizes and probably with, mismatched buttons. Some of them have got to be different colors of cloth, I feel like. Whatever materials they are made from, you gotta have one pocket that's purple and another that's red. Stitched with different colors of thread. Yeah. I don't know if you don't want to have, I feel like there should be at least one or two secret pockets on the inside, but visually, pockets on the outside would be amazing. Anyway, yeah, pass me the herbal wine. It's a long-term project plan. No one ever talked about the thing with the bulls ever again. At least not in front of the men. And that's actually where we left off. We finished the thing with the bulls and we stopped there. We had heard from the innkeeper that the witches had gotten onto some kind of boat. Fortunately, the horrible women left on a riverboat that afternoon, after one of them rescued her cat, which had cornered 25 stone of confused bull, and was trying to toss it in the air and play with it. That's where we're at. So it's already been about half an hour, so why don't I get into it? In my copy, we're on page 110. And I can already spy a joke further down this page. The big paddle wheel sloshed through the thick brown soup of the river. The fact that it's sloshed means it's at least thinner than the Ankh. The motive power was several dozen trolls under a sunshade, trudging along an endless belt. Birds sang in the trees on the distant banks. The scent of hibiscus wafted across the water, almost, but unfortunately not quite, overpowering the scent of the river itself. "Now this," said Nanny Ogg, "is more like it." She stretched out on the deck chair and turned to look at Granny Weatherwax, whose brows were knitted in the intense concentration of reading. Nanny's mouth spread in an evil grin. "You know what this river is called?" she said. "No." "It's called the View River." "Yes." "Know what that means?" "No." "The old (masculine) river," said Nanny. The old masculine river. "Yes." "Words have sex in foreign parts," said Nanny hopefully. Granny didn't budge. "Wouldn't be at all surprised," she murmured. Nanny sagged, trying to get a rise out of Granny. "That's one of Desiderata's books, isn't it?" "Yes," said Granny. She licked her thumb decorously, and turned the page. "Where's Margaret gone?" "She's having a lie down in the cabin," said Granny, without looking up. "Tummy upset?" "It's her head this time. Now be quiet, Githa. I'm having a read." "What about?" said Nanny cheerfully. Granny Weatherwax sighed and put her finger on the page to mark her place. "This place we're going to," she said, "Genua. Desiderata says it's decadent." Nanny Ogg's smile remained fixed. "Yes," she said. "That's good, is it? I've never been to a city before." Never been to a city before. Granny Weatherwax paused. She'd been pondering for some while. She wasn't at all certain about the meaning of the word decadent. She'd dismissed the possibility that it meant having 10 teeth. Decadent. In the same sense that Nanny Ogg, for example, was unident. Wow. That's... The city of Genua has 10 teeth. Whatever it meant, it was something Desiderata had felt necessary to write down. Granny Weatherwax did not generally trust books as a means of information, but now she had no choice. She had a vague idea that decadent had something to do with not opening the curtains all day.
She says it's also a city of art, wit, and culture, said Granny.
We shall be all right there, then, said Nanny confidently.
Particularly noted for the beauty of its women, she says here.
We shall fade right in, no trouble. Granny turned the pages carefully. Desiderata had paid close attention to affairs all over the disk. I don't think anyone will mind if you slip that into the character. On the other hand, she hadn't been writing for readers other than herself. So her notes tended to the cryptic and were aides memoire rather than coherent accounts. Farmos has, I think, a somewhat... No, Farmos' character does like books, right? I feel like Farmos' character read a lot. The Warlock. Thought there was a fair amount of book reading. Granny read.
Now, L rules the city as the power behind the throne, and Baron S, they say, has been killed, drowned in the river. He was a wicked man, though, not, I think, as wicked as L, for she says she wants to make it a magic kingdom, a happy and peaceful place, and when people do that, look out for spies on every corner, and no man dare speak out, for who dare spec out? Spelled differently the two times it's written down there. One time as S-P-E-A-K, and one time as S-P-E-K-E. For who dare spec out against evil done in the name of happiness and peace? All the streets are clean, and axes are sharp. But E is safe at least, for now L has plans for her. And Mrs. G, who was the Baron's amour, hides in the swamp and fights back with swamp magic. But you cannot fight mirror magic, which is all reflection.
Fairy godmothers came in twos, Granny knew. So that was Desiderata and L. But who was this person in the swamp?
Githa,
said Granny. What's it? Said Nanny Og, who was dozing off.
Desiderata says some woman here is someone's armor.
Probably a metaphor, said Nanny Og. It's drink time.
Oh,
said Granny darkly.
one of them things. But no one can stop Mardi Gras, she read. If anything can be done, it be on Samedi Nuit Mort, the last night of Carnival, the night halfway between the living and the dead, when magic flows in the streets. If L is vulnerable, then... if L is vulnerable, it is then, for Carnival is everything she hates.
Granny Weatherwax pulled her hat down over her eyes to shield them from the sun.
It says here they have a great big carnival every year, she said. Mardi Gras, it's called.
I'm just assuming that Granny would pronounce it Mardi Gras.
That means fat lunchtime,
said Nanny Ogg, international linguist.
Garcon, etc. gross mint tulip, avec petit bol de peanuts, por favor.
Garcon. Every time it's Garcon. Spelled with a K. Granny Weatherwax shut the book. Of course. She would not, of course, admit it to a third party, least of all another witch, but as Genua drew nearer, Granny was becoming less and less confident. She was waiting in Genua. After all this time, staring at her out of the mirror, smiling. The sun beat down. She tried defying it. Sooner or later, she was going to have to give in, though. It was going to be time to remove another vest. Nanny Ogg sat and drew cards for her relatives for a while, and then yawned. She was a witch who liked noise and people around her. Nanny Ogg was getting bored. It was a big boat, more like a floating inn, and she felt certain there was some excitement somewhere. She laid her bag on her seat and wandered away to look for it. The trolls plodded on. The sun was red, fat, and low when Granny Weatherwax awoke. She looked around guiltily from the shelter of her hat brim, in case anyone had noticed her asleep. Falling asleep during the day was something only old women did, and Granny Weatherwax was an old woman only when it suited her purposes. The only spectator was Grebo, curled up on Nanny's chair. His one good eye was fixed on her, but it wasn't so terrifying as the milky white stare of his blind one.
Just considering our strategy, she muttered, just in case.
She closed the book and strode off to their cabin. Was it open? Last time, that's twice she's closed that book. I mean, you can close a book multiple times. Look, I'm doing it now. But usually you open it in between. She closed the book and strode off to their cabin. It wasn't a big one. Some of the staterooms looked huge, but what with the herbal wine and everything, Granny hadn't felt up to using any influence to get one. Capital I influence. Magrat and Nanny Ogg were sitting on a bunk in gloomy silence.
I feels a bit peckish,
said Granny.
I smelled stew on the way here, so let's go and have a look, eh? What about that?
The other two continued to stare at the floor. I suppose there's always pumpkin, said Magrat. And there's always the dwarf bread.
There's always dwarf bread,
said Nanny automatically. She looked up, her face a mask of shame.
That's me. You know the money. The money what we all gave you to keep in your knickers for safety,
said Granny. Something about the way the conversation was going
suggested the first few pebbles slipping before a major landslide.
That's the money I'm referring to.
The money in the big leather bag that we were going to be very careful about spending, said Granny.
You see? The money.
Oh, that money, said Granny.
Is gone,
said Nanny. Stolen? She's been gambling, said Magrat, in tones of smug horror. With men!
It wasn't gambling,
snapped Nanny.
I never gamble. They were no good at cards. I won no end of games.
But you lost money, said Granny. Nanny Ogg looked down again and muttered something. What? said Granny.
I said I won nearly all of them,
said Nanny.
And then I thought, here, we could really have a bit of money to, spend in the city. And I've always been very good at Cripple Mister Onion.
So you decided to bet heavily, said Granny.
How did you know that?
Got a feeling about it, said Granny wearily. And suddenly everyone else was lucky. Am I right?
It was weird,
said Nanny.
Well, it's not gambling,
said Nanny.
I didn't see it was gambling. They were no good when I started playing. It's not gambling to play against someone who's no good. It's common sense.
There was nearly $14 in that bag, said Magrat, not counting the foreign money. Granny Weatherwax sat down on the bunk and drummed her fingers on the woodwork. There was a far-away look in her eyes. The phrase, card sharp, had never reached her side of the Ramtops, where people were friendly and direct, and, should they encounter a professional cheat, tended to nail his hand to the table in an easy and outgoing manner, without asking him what he called himself. But human nature was the same everywhere.
You're not upset, are you, Esme?
Said Nanny anxiously.
I expect I can pick up a new broom when we get home.
What?
After she lost all her money, she bet her broom, said Magrat triumphantly.
What do you call that? It's not a sore winner because Magrat didn't win, but what do you call it when you're smug about someone else failing? There's got to be a word for that, right? Maybe not in English. I bet Japanese or German or something has a word for it. Schadenfreude. Schadenfreude is it, isn't it? Holier than thou. Holier than thou, I think, is a little different. It's similar, though. It's very close. But this is more just being happy that someone else lost. Or sour grapes. Schadenfreude it is, yeah.
Have we got any money at all? Said Granny.
A trawl of various pockets and knicker legs produced 47 pence.
Right,
said Granny. She scooped it up.
That ought to be enough. To start with, anyway. Where are these men?
Oh boy. You know this is going to be good.
What are you going to do? Said Magrat.
I'm going to play cards, said Granny.
You can't do that,
said Magrat, who had recognized the gleam in Granny's eye. "You're going to use magic to win. You mustn't use magic to win, not to affect the laws of chance. That's wicked." You don't want to be a wicked witch. Change in my socks, debit card in my bra, but never money in my knickers. You can keep money in your hat, as long as it's secure. The boat was practically a floating town. Well, before it was a floating inn, but now it's practically a floating town. Oh, okay, here. Come here and look at me like that. The boat was practically a floating town, and in the balmy night air no one bothered much about going indoors. The riverboat's flat deck was dotted with groups of dwarfs, trolls, and humans, lounging among the cargo. Granny threaded her way between them and headed for the long saloon that ran almost the entire length of the boat. There was the sound of revelry within. The riverboats were the quickest and easiest transport for hundreds of miles. On them you got, as Granny would put it, all sorts. And the riverboats going downstream were always crowded with a certain type of opportunist as fat lunchtime approached. Is that what we're calling Mardi Gras from now on? Fat lunchtime? Has it changed names even in the book? Excuse me. She walked into the saloon. An onlooker might have thought it had a magic doorway. Granny Weatherwax, as she walked toward it, strode as she usually strode. As soon as she passed through, though, she was suddenly a bent old woman, hobbling along, and a sight to touch all but the wickedest heart. She approached the bar, and then stopped. Behind it was the biggest mirror Granny had ever seen. She stared fixedly at it, but it seemed safe enough. Well, she'd have to risk it. She hunched her back a little more and addressed the barman.
"Excusez-moi, young hom,"
she began. Footnote. Something about Nanny Og rubbed off on people. End of footnote. The barman gave her a disinterested look and went on polishing a glass.
"What can I do for you, old crone?"
he said. There was only the faintest suggestion of a flicker in Granny's expression of elderly imbecility.
"Oh, you can understand me," she said.
"We get all sorts on the river," said the barman.
"Then I was wondering if you could be so kind as to loan me a deck, I think it's called, of cards,"
quavered Granny.
"Going to play a game of old maid, are you?"
said the barman. There was a chilly flicker across Granny's eyes again as she said,
"No, just patience,
capital P.
I'd like to try and get the hang of it."
He reached under the counter and tossed a greasy pack toward her. She thanked him effusively and tottered off to a small table in the shadows, where she dealt a few cards randomly on the drink-ringed surface and stared at them. It was only a few minutes later that a gentle hand was laid on her shoulder. She looked up into a friendly, open face that anyone would lend money to. A gold tooth glittered as the man spoke. "Excuse me, good mother," he said, "but my friends and I—" He gestured to some more welcoming faces at a nearby table. "Would feel much more comfortable in ourselves if you were to join us. It can be very dangerous for a woman traveling by herself."
Granny Weatherwax smiled nicely at him, and then waved vaguely at her cards.
"I can never remember whether the ones are worth more or less than the pictures," she said. "Forget my own head next, I expect."
They all laughed. Granny hobbled to the other table. She took the vacant seat, which put the mirror right behind her shoulder. She smiled to herself, and then leaned forward, all eagerness.
"So tell me," she said, "how do you play this game, then?"
All witches are very conscious of stories. They can feel stories, in the same way that a bather in a little pool can feel the unexpected trout. I feel like that's some kind of band name right there. The Unexpected Trout. Or like, I mean, honestly, it's just a good name for a fable, speaking of. Knowing how stories work is almost all the battle. The Unexpected Trout would be a great band name. For example, when an obvious innocent sits down with 3 experienced card sharpers and says, "How do you play this game, then?" someone is about to be shaken down until their teeth fall out. You gotta love the acknowledgement of the trope here. Like, Terry was writing this and went, okay, I'm writing a trope, and that's why it's gonna work, because Granny is taking advantage of a trope. Like, Granny is setting this up to be a trope, to be a story. That's... Magrat and Nanny Og sat side by side on the narrow bunk. Nanny was distractedly tickling Grebo's stomach, while he purred. "She'll get into terrible trouble if she uses magic to win," said Magrat. "And you know how she hates losing," she added. Yeah. 1 in a million, but it just might work. Is this 1 in a million, though? How do we know this isn't 1 in 100,000? Take off your boot, close one eye, balance on one leg. Granny Weatherwax was not a good loser. We were just talking about that. From her point of view, losing was something that happened to other people.
"It's her ego," said Nanny Og. "Everyone's got one of them. A ego. And she's got a great big one. Of course, that's all part of being a witch, having a big ego."
To be clear, it's spelled with 2 G's.
"She's bound to use magic," said Magrat. "It's tempting fate, using magic in a game of chance," said Nanny Og. "Cheating's all right. That's practically fair. I mean, anyone can cheat. But using magic, well, it's tempting fate.
No, not fate, said Magrat darkly. Nanny Ogg shivered. Come on, said Magrat. We can't let her do it.
It's her ego, said Nanny Ogg weakly. Terrible thing, a big ego. I got, said Granny, 3 little pictures of kings and such like, and 3 of them funny #1 cards.
The 3 men beamed and winked at one another. That's Cripple Onion, said the one who had introduced Granny to the table, and who had turned out to be called Mr. Frank, spelled out M-I-S-T-E-R.
And that's good, is it? said Granny.
It means you win yet again, dear lady. He pushed a pile of pennies toward her.
Gosh, said Granny, that means I've got, what would it be? Almost $5 now.
Can't understand it, said Mr. Frank. It must be the famous beginner's luck, eh?
Soon be poor men if it goes on like this,
said one of his companions.
She'll have the coats off our backs right enough,
said the third man.
Ha ha!
Think we should give up right now, said Mr. Frank. Ha ha!
Ha ha! Ha ha!
Oh, I want to go on, said Granny, grinning anxiously. I'm just getting the hang of it.
Well, you'd better give us a sporting chance to win a little bit back, ha ha, said Mr. Frank. Ha ha.
Ha ha! Ha ha!
Ha ha. What about $50 a stake? Ha ha. There's so many ha-has here. It's just... Look at this page. Ha ha. Ha ha ha. There were more back here. Ha 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 ha. It's just... like H-A-H-A period. And then that one there was H-A-H-A question mark. Ha ha. Ha ha. Ha ha. A lot of forced, awkward chuckling. Yeah, it's very staged. Like, ah, yes, we've got to be friendly, and now we're getting to the good part, ha ha. You're doing so well, ha ha. Like chatting online circa 2002, ha ha. Was that pre-LOL? What about $50 a stake? Ha ha.
Oh, I reckon she'll want $1 a stake, a sporting lady like her,
said the third man. Ha ha. Granny looked down at her pile of pennies. For a moment, she looked uncertain. And then, they could see, she realized. How much could she lose, the way the cards were going? ICQ. MSN Messenger. I used ICQ a little, but I think I used MSN Messenger more.
Yes, she said. $1 a stake.
She blushed.
This is exciting, isn't it?
Yeah, it was later. Yeah, said Mr. Frank. He drew the pack toward him. There was a horrible noise. All three men stared at the bar, where shards of mirror were cascading to the floor. What happened? Granny gave him a sweet old smile. She hadn't appeared to look around.
I reckon the glass he was polishing must have slipped out of his hand and smashed right into the mirror, she said. I do hope he don't have to pay for it out of his wages, the poor boy.
The men exchanged glances.
Come on, said Granny. I've got my dollar all ready.
Mr. Frank looked nervously at the ravaged frame. Then he shrugged. The movement dislodged something somewhere. There was a muffled snapping noise, like a mousetrap carrying out the last rites. Mr. Frank went white and gripped his sleeve. A small metal contraption, all springs and twisted metal, fell out. A crumpled-up ace of cups was tangled up in it. Whoops, said Granny. Magrat peered through the window into the saloon.
What's she doing now?
Hissed Nanny. She's grinning again, said Magrat. Nanny shook her head.
Ego,
she said. Granny Weatherwax had that method of play that has reduced professional gamblers to incoherent rage throughout the multiverse. She held her cards tightly cupped in her hands a few inches from her face, allowing the merest fraction of each one to protrude. She glared at them as if daring them to offend her, and she never seemed to take her eyes off them, except to watch the dealing. And she took far too long. And she never, ever took risks. After 25 minutes, she was down $1, and Mr. Frank was sweating. Granny had already helpfully pointed out 3 times that he'd accidentally dealt cards off the bottom of the deck, and she'd asked for another pack,
because, look, this one's got all little marks on the back.
That's called a Svengali deck. It was her eyes. That was what it was. Twice he'd folded on a perfectly good 3-card onion, only to find out that she'd been holding a lousy double bagel. Then the 3rd time, thinking he'd worked out her play, he'd called her out and run a decent flush right into the maw of a 5-card onion that the old bag must have been patiently constructing for ages. And then his knuckles went white, and then the dreadful, terrible hag had said,
"Have I won with all these little cards? Gosh, aren't I the lucky one?"
And then she started humming when she looked at her cards. Normally, the 3 of them would have welcomed this sort of thing. I'm sure it exists. And I'm sure at least some of it is based off the description from this scene. Normally, the 3 of them would have welcomed this sort of thing. The teeth tappers, the eyebrow raisers, the ear rubbers. They were as good as money in the sock under the mattress to a man who knew how to read such things. But the appalling old crone was as transparent as a lump of coal.
And the humming was insistent. You found yourself trying to follow the tune. It made your teeth tingle. Next thing, you were glumly watching while she laid down a measly broken flush in front of your even more measly 2-card onion and said,
"What? Is it me again?"
Pause for a second. Something that, because obviously this is a poker game, right? It's not poker, but it's obviously a poker game. Something that I appreciate here that often, I don't know much about poker, but in film and television, especially like what feels like poorly written film and television, but sometimes even in some like stuff that's not supposed to be poorly written, you get these characters where it's like, ooh, he's good at cards. And you know how he's good at cards? He always has a really good hand, right? He's always got a royal flush or whatever. He's good at cards but that's not what poker is, right? From my limited understanding, because anyone can have a good hand. That's luck of the draw, you know. If you're lucky, you get a good hand, but you can't really control that very much. So the trick is winning with a bad hand. And that's what, you know, sometimes Granny's got a good hand here, and sometimes she doesn't, but she's still winning. So I appreciate that description of this scene, that, you know, it's not like Granny's got the, you know, triple onion every single time. She's winning with a, what did he say? A measly broken flush. Because that's always, I feel like, boring in like some big movie. There's a big gambling scene, and then, oh, you know, that guy there, oh, look at him, he's got a royal flush. That's because he's really good. That's not how it works. It's not like, yes, I have leveled up in poker enough where now I get the good cards. Anyway. I don't remember the card game from Ni no Kuni. I wonder whether or not I actually got... Because I didn't finish that game. I got past the place with the bananas. All right. Mr. Frank was desperately trying to remember how to play cards without his sleeve device, a handy mirror, and a marked deck. In the teeth of a hum like a fingernail down a blackboard. It wasn't as if the ghastly old creature even knew how to play properly. After an hour, she was $4 ahead, and when she said, "I am a lucky girl," Mr. Frank bit through his tongue. And then he got a natural, great onion. There was no realistic way to beat a great onion. It was something that happened to you once or twice in a lifetime. She folded. The old bitch folded. She abandoned one blasted dollar, and she folded. That's what I was just talking about. Magrat peered through the window again. "What's happening?" said Nanny. "They all look very angry." Nanny took off her hat and removed her pipe. She lit it and tossed the match overboard.
Ah, she'll be humming, you mark my words. She's got a very annoying hum, has Esme.
Nanny looked satisfied.
Has she started cleaning out her ear yet?
Don't think so.
No one cleans out her ear like Esme.
What a weird thing to say. And then she was cleaning out her ear. It was done in a very ladylike way, and the daft old baggage probably wasn't even aware she was doing it. She just kept inserting her little finger in her ear and swiveling it around. It made a noise like a small pool cue being chalked. It was displacement activity. That's what it was. They all cracked in the end. She folded again, and it had taken him 5 bloody minutes to put together a bloody onion.
I remember, said Nanny Og, when she come over our house for the party when King Valence got crowned, and we played Chase My Neighbour Up the Passage with the kiddies for halfpennies. She accused Jason's youngest of cheating and sulked for a week afterward.
Chase my neighbor up the passage. Was he cheating?
I expect so,
said Nanny proudly.
The trouble with Esme is that she don't know how to lose. She's never had much practice.
Lobsang Dibbler says sometimes you have to lose in order to win, said Magrat.
Sounds daft to me,
said Nanny.
That's Yin Buddhism, is it?
No, they're the ones who say you have to have lots of money to win, said Magrat. Footnote. In the path of the scorpion, the way to win is to lose every fight except the last one. You use the enemy's strength against himself.
What? You get him to hit himself, sort of thing?
Said Nanny.
Sounds daft.
Magrat glowered. What do you know about it? She said, with uncharacteristic sharpness.
What?
Well, I'm fed up, said Magrat. At least I'm making an effort to learn things. I don't go around just bullying people and acting bad-tempered all the time. Nanny took her pipe out of her mouth.
I'm not bad-tempered,
she said mildly. All right, so Yen Buddhism, no, that's the one where they say you have to have lots of money to win, said Magrat. Footnote. The Yen Buddhists are the richest religious sect in the universe. They hold that the accumulation of money is a great evil and burden to the soul. They therefore, regardless of personal hazard, see it as their unpleasant duty to acquire as much as possible in order to reduce the risk to innocent people. End of footnote. Yen Buddhism. All right.
I'm not bad-tempered, she said mildly.
I wasn't talking about you.
Well, Esme's always been bad-tempered, said Nanny. It comes natural to her.
And she hardly ever does real magic. What good is being a witch if you don't do magic? Why doesn't she use it to help people? Nanny peered at her through the pipe smoke.
'Cause she knows how good she'd be at it, I suppose, she said. Anyway, I've known her a long time. Known the whole family. All the Weatherwaxes is good at magic, even the men. They've got this magical streak in 'em. Kind of a curse. Anyway, she thinks you can't help people with magic. Not properly. It's true, too.
Then what good? Nanny prodded at the pipe with a match.
I seem to recall she come over and helped you out when you had that spot of plague in your village, she said.
Spot of plague?
Worked the clock around, I recall. Never known her not to treat someone ill who needed it, even when they, were pretty oozy. And when the big old troll that lives under the broken mountain come down for help because his wife was sick and everyone threw rocks at him, I remember it was Esme that went back with him and delivered the baby.
His wife was sick. Delivered the baby.
Ha! Then, when old Chicken Wire Hopkins threw a rock at Esme a little while afterward, all his barns was mysteriously trampled flat in the night. She always said you can't help people with magic, but you can help them with skin. By doing real things, she meant.
I'm not saying she's not basically a nice person, Magrat began.
Ha! I am! You'd have to go a long day's journey to find someone basically nastier than Esme,
said Nanny Og.
And this is me saying it. She knows exactly what she is. She was born to be good, and she don't like it.
She's good, but she's nasty. Nanny tapped her pipe out on the rail and turned back to the saloon.
What you got to understand about Esme, my girl, she said, is that she's got a psychology as well as a big ego. I'm dad glad I ain't.
Granny was $12 ahead. Everything else in the saloon had stopped. You could hear the distant splash of the paddles and the cry of the leadmen. Granny won another $5 with a 3-card onion. I'm trying to get to the end of this scene. What do you mean, a psychology? Said Magrat. Have you been reading books? Nanny ignored her.
The thing to watch out for now, she said, is when she goes ch-ch-ch under her breath. That comes after the ear cleaning. It generally means she's planning something.
Mr. Frank drummed his fingers on the table, realized to his horror that he was doing it, and bought 3 new cards to cover his confusion. The old baggage didn't appear to notice. He stared at the new hand. He ventured $2 and bought 1 more card. He stared again. What were the odds, he thought, against getting a great onion twice in one day? The important thing was not to panic. I think, he heard himself say, that I may hazard another $2. He glanced at his companions. They obediently folded, one after another.
Well, I don't know,
said Granny, apparently talking to her cards. She cleaned her ear again. Tsh, tsh, tsh.
What do you call it when, you want to put more money in, sort of thing?
It's called raising, said Mr. Frank, his knuckles going white.
I'll do one of them raisins then. $5, I think.
Mr. Frank's knees ground together.
I'll see you and raise you $10, he snapped.
I'll do that too,
said Granny.
Granny looked down, suddenly crestfallen. I've got a broomstick.
A tiny alarm bell rang somewhere at the back of Mr. Frank's mind, but now he was galloping headlong toward victory.
Right!
He spread the cards on the table. The crowd sighed. He began to pull the pot toward him. Granny's hand closed over his wrist.
I ain't put my cards down yet, she said archly.
You don't need to, snapped Mr. Frank. There's no chance you could beat that, madam.
I can if I can cripple it, said Granny. That's why it's called Cripple Mister Onion, ain't it?
He hesitated.
But, you could only do that if you had a perfect 9-card run,
he burbled, staring into the depths of her eyes. Granny stared back.
You know,
she said calmly,
I thought I had rather a lot of these black pointy ones. That's good, is it?
She spread the hand. The collective audience made a sort of little gasping noise, in unison. Mr. Frank looked around wildly.
Oh, very well done, madam,
said an elderly gentleman. There was a round of polite applause from the crowd. The big, inconvenient crowd.
Yes, said Mr. Frank. Yes, well done. You're a very quick learner, aren't you?
Quicker'n you.
You owe me $55 and a broomstick,
said Granny. I felt that was necessary. They started with $14. All right, I'm going to finish this scene, which is just a little bit further. Magrat and Nanny were waiting for her as she swept out.
Here's your broom, she snapped, and I hopes you've got all your stuff together, 'cause we're leaving.
Why? Said Magrat.
Because as soon as it gets quiet, some men are going to come looking for us.
They scurried after her toward their tiny cabin. You weren't using magic? Said Magrat.
No.
And not cheating? Said Nanny.
No, just headology,
said Granny.
Where did you learn to play like that?
Nanny demanded. Granny stopped. They cannoned into her.
Remember last winter, when old Mother Dismas was taken really bad, and I went and sat up with her every night for almost a month?
Yes?
You sit up every night dealing Cripple Mister Onion with someone who's got a detached retina in her second sight, and you soon learn how to play,
said Granny. With someone who's got a detached retina in her second sight. And that's where I'm going to stop, as it ticks over to 8:30. Oh, boy. Granny and her headology. That was a perfect scene. Just the frustration in Mr. Frank's internal dialogue. And yeah, Nanny saying, like, has she started cleaning her ear yet? No one cleans her ear like Granny. She was cleaning her ear! Just that was a great beat. Oh boy. Yeah. The vacant seat with its back to a big mirror. The mechanical what's it up his sleeve with an ace of cups. And using a Svengali deck. I'm like 80% certain it's called a Svengali deck. Yeah. Yeah. Right? Oh, is it not? Maybe a Svengali deck is the one that lets you, like, turn all of the cards in a deck into the same card. I thought it was the one with the marks on the back. I'm confused. Is it just called a marked deck? That's embarrassing. Does sound like a great game though, Cripple Mister Onion. Yeah, I'm sure. I'm almost pretty. Let's see. Oh, the Discworld Wiki's got Cripple Mister Onion full rules. This text-only version was transcribed on 4th July, yeah, that's my birthday, 1998. A few years ago. Someone wrote up these rules a few years ago. Ah, boy. And Board Game Geek has a Cripple Mister Onion, which looks like it might be from 1993. Maybe that's just citing the publication of the book. Is there a price here? No listings found. Looks like it might be out of print. Maybe. That particular one, I'm sure there's another. That's early internet. Yeah, it is. Yeah. So, unless there's any unexpected changes like there was last week, I should be here on Friday. So hopefully everybody had fun with the riverboat casino royale scene. And yeah, have a lovely evening. Say hi to Mr. Sharky when he's done with rehearsal. And yeah, hopefully I will see you on Friday. Right, Ben? Wag, wag, wag. Wag, 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 wag. Wag, wag, wag. I gotta go finish the scene in Yakuza Kiwami. Because I'm right at the end of the game. I'm at, like, in the final fight, and I just paused it to come do this. Yeah. Well, all her fake tells, right? They're not even, like, tells. They're more like schemes to annoy people. And it's just a confusion of professional grifters. See, I don't think that, like, Nanny didn't say, is she cleaning her ear because that's a tell of hers. I think she said, is she cleaning her ear because that's something she's going to do to piss these people off? You know, is she saying under her breath because that's what she's going to do to, like, I mean, maybe it's a tell. It sounded to me more like a setup, like a play. But maybe they were tells. She's got a real annoying hum, as Esme. Oh boy. All right, well, have a nice night. Say hi to Mr. Sharky. Have a good rest of your week. And I'll see you on Friday, okay? Okay? Because of their tails. Yeah, you wouldn't be very good at poker, would you, Ben? You can't read cards. Or hold them well. You could hold, like, one sideways, or, like, you could chew them. Okay, goodbye.